Here at VFC, we get to interact with a ton of anglers that are trying to level up their fly fishing skills. They're either struggling or frustrated with their current abilities, or they're kind of just bored and going through the motions.
Alex and I mean, we've been there. Between the two of us, we've got like what, 40 years of fly fishing experience. So we've had more than a few moments where we've been so frustrated that we're like, okay, yeah, the heck with it. We're just gonna go sell all of this stuff at the next garage sale. But we've been able to push through those moments of frustration and get out there, catch some more fish, and add a few more things to our fly fishing resume.
Today, we want to take all of those experiences and boil them down into 3 simple tips. Whether you're a complete beginner or a seasoned angler, these tips 100% will take your fly fishing to the next level.
What I wish I would have focused on more as a beginner, and what I think every beginner should spend way more time paying attention to, is their presentation. It's one of those foundational skills in fly fishing where if you want to catch fish, if you want to get good at this, you've got to learn how to put your fly out there in a way that looks natural, a way that looks like the flies should. And the biggest thing holding back a lot of beginners and even a lot of intermediate anglers is their presentation is just not quite there. And I don't think it's ever anything you really perfect, but it is something that you refine and get better at as you progress through this sport. So you look at a situation like this, for example, thinking about presentation. We want the fly to look natural. We don't want there to be drag on it. We want to put it down in a way that it's not going to spook the fish. I've got, I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a fish here, in front of that rock, right there. It just rose up there, right off of this bank, right there in the middle. There's fish rising everywhere. And it looks like you've just got one current coming through, but you actually have a couple of different current seams that you've got to deal with in this little bend of the river here. So if I were to just come up here, yeah, if fish are rising, just go for it. But you got to take a second to look at what the water's doing, look at what the fish are doing, look at where they're rising. And I almost formulate a plan in my mind of, all right, I'm gonna go for this fish first. Then you've got to think, how am I gonna get the fly to that fish in a way that's gonna look natural and not spook it and not have any drag. Those are the big things that you're gonna focus on. One other thing to keep in consideration with presentation is not only how are you presenting the fly, but how are you presenting yourself? And by that, I mean, where are you standing? Are you in the right spot? And as you try to get into position to get to the fish that you want to get to, are you gonna spook fish that might be there? And take this pool, for example. Got this nice, beautiful bend, comes down, there's fish rising everywhere in it. But this looks like good water right here in front of me. So if I just start tromping through this like an elephant, okay, I'm gonna spook all those fish. Those fish are gonna go spook those fish. They're gonna quit rising. The whole river's gonna get blown. And next thing you know, I'm going home in a bad mood, and that ain't good for anybody, okay? See, and a fish just rose right here. Proves my point right there in front of me. So if I'd have walked through this, I would have spooked him. He could have spooked them. Okay, work the water close to far. Fish the stuff that's closest to you first, then work your way further up. A lot of anglers, and this was definitely me when I was new, they spend way too much time casting. We're like, oh yeah, I'm so excited. I'm gonna throw like 15 casts. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but the more casts that you throw, okay, all that line whizzing by in the air, that's an indicator to the fish that something's going on. It can actually spook some fish. You also run the risk of tangling more if your line's in the air more. And as we all know, you're not gonna catch fish in the air. You need to have your flies in the water. So you should spend less time casting, more time with your flies in the water. I like to make it a goal to get my flies to where I need them to be within 3 casts. So if I can't do that, I either need to cast further or I need to change my position. Something else to think about, especially in water that's clear like this, your first cast is gonna count a lot. So you really wanna pay attention to where your casts are landing, and you wanna get that first cast as much on the money as you possibly can. Bad casts, lining trout, which That just means you land fly line on a fish that's rising. You do that, that's a surefire way to put that fish down. To summarize and to hopefully drive that point home, presentation is key. You can have the perfect fly on, but if your presentation isn't good, the fish are gonna ignore it. Whereas you can have a fly that it might be an okay match, but if your presentation's good, it's a very good chance that the trout are gonna come up and eat it. Now, enough with my own presentation. I'm gonna get back to catching some fish.
A lot of anglers, they fall into something what I like to call the comfort zone. They go to the same river, they fish the same hole with the same flies. And because they've put in the reps and they've got their rig dialed in and they figured out where the fish are holding, they catch lots and lots of fish. For example, the other day, I was talking with an angler and he mentioned he was really confident on small streams, but felt completely lost when it came to bigger rivers. He had been out a few times, but he hadn't even caught a single fish. A couple of years ago, I was feeling the exact same way. And so I threw myself into the fire and I went to a really big river like 10 plus times in the span of 3 or 4 months. And it's like 3.5 hours from my house in the middle of nowhere. So it took some dedication. The first 3 or 4 times, I got my butt kicked. I don't even know if I caught a single fish. The next 3 or 4, I got my rig dialed as far as depth and fly selection goes and started catching a fish here or there. And when I caught more fish, I started taking note of where I was catching those fish from and developed a kind of sense for where they were hanging out. By trip 10 or 11, I was consistently catching 5 or 6 nice fish every time I went. And now, this is one of my favorite rivers, and I can feel pretty confident in my abilities when I go fish there. And what makes fly fishing so great is its depth. There are so many different ways that you can level up your skills. And I like to think about it in terms of macro and micro. Macro skills, they're more broad. These could be big or smaller rivers like we just talked about. Going after new species, like if you normally fish for trout, you could go try and catch some bass or some carp, or head to the ocean and catch some bonefish. You could try specializing in nymphing or dry flies or streamers. In fact, right now, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get a lot better at fishing dry flies. You can start diving into learning more about bugs and the different fly patterns to match them. You can get into fly tying. That's a whole hobby inside of another hobby. You can focus on some new rigs or learning new knots. You can go fish crowded rivers with small flies and really picky fish where presentation is absolutely vital. Or you could go out and explore and develop the skill of finding off-the-grid rivers. You can wade on foot or fish a river from a drift boat. And heck, maybe you're not even fishing rivers. Maybe you're focused on still water. So as you can see, tons of stuff in the macro, but what about the micro? We can actually take each of these categories and go a little bit deeper. So using my dry flies as an example, you could focus on fishing different rigs like a single dry, longer leaders, a double dry fly rig, a dry dropper. You can focus on fishing really, really small dry flies to picky fish in calm water. You can try new fly patterns and styles. You can work on your casting, minimizing those false casts, becoming more accurate. You could go out to your local river a few times a week and really start to understand the year-round hatches. And maybe you set a goal. I want to catch a really big fish on a dry fly. These are just a few examples of how you can challenge yourself, of how you can go outside of your comfort zone. So if you're feeling stagnant or feeling bored, pick a category and go for it.
One of the best ways to improve your fly fishing game is to surround yourself with fishy people. Alex, can you please leave?
And we just talked about this, right? I'm trying to level up my dry fly fishing game right now. And do you know who's really good at fishing dry flies and has helped me out a bunch? This guy.
Unfortunately, you can't always have a good fishing buddy in your life. It'd be great if you did, but not all of us have that opportunity. But one of the most common questions that we get into the podcast every week has something to do with either finding some friends to fish with, or people asking like, what's the correct way to ask if I can tag along with somebody to learn from them? So to make connecting with other anglers easier, we're excited to announce the launch of our brand new fly fishing community.
We've spent a long time thinking about this, and we're really excited to interact with you guys. Spencer and I, we're gonna be in there every day answering questions.
Unless we're fishing. We won't be in there if we're fishing. You'll also find discussion topics and threads, kind of like Reddit, if you've ever spent any time there, on literally everything about fly fishing. Talking fishing with dry flies, nymphs, streamers, good indicator rigs. We'll even have a place where you can ask people to give you feedback on how your flies look if you're into tying flies.
And I don't know about you, Spencer, but I like bragging to my fishing buddies sometimes. Say I catch like a really big fish, or I experience this beautiful new river. We're gonna have an entire place where you can just post pictures and tell us your stories so that we can all be inspired together.
If that sounds too much like Facebook and you're a little nervous, don't worry. We've got community guidelines that we're actually going to enforce, unlike Zuckerberg. Right? If you're mean, if you ain't nice to people, if you're just talking down and being a jerk, boom, you're out. We don't have time for that. We don't have the patience for that stuff. And if anybody thinks they're gonna start a thread about Diet Pepsi being better than Diet Coke, banned for life.
You're out.
Yeah.
Our hope is that this community will be a place where we can learn and grow and help others live real life.
You know what the best part is, Alex?
What?
It's free. I know, I did the same thing when he told me.
So what are you waiting for?
There's a link in the description. Go sign up right now and become the best angler you can be.